I've got another guitar project today. I'm going to take this Boomer Epiphone Les Paul and turn it into a metal machine. It needs a lot of cleaning. It needs some setup, and we're going to try to do some fun mods, I guess, or at least some aesthetic work. It's pretty dusty. You can see from these close-ups here. This guitar is kind of brand new, but also not at all. It was bought in 2014 and essentially never played. Was given to me to work on by a friend who bought this years ago, intending to play it and can't because of arthritis. So we're going to turn it into a shred machine and see what we can do with this. If you saw my crazy 10-string video last week, it blew up. It got a ton of views. That guitar was an absolute mess in every possible way. This should be a complete walk in the park. It mainly needs cleaning and a setup, I'm sure. So I'm going to show you how I work on a regular guitar that's not a piece of junk. Along with this guitar, there's also this very dusty Fender Mustang one. This is a 20-watt practice amp. Actually have one of those Mustang amps that I used for teaching guitar for years. It's a handy little amp. It's not bad for what it does. It's not a gigging amp, but for bringing to a student's house and showing off all the cool effects you can do on guitar, it's a great little amp. Doesn't sound bad. I'm going to do a before and after with this guitar this time so we can see how far it goes. I take in lots of guitars for rehabilitation, cleaning, setup. I'm not a luthier, but I do charge to set up guitars for people and clean them, do some electronics work, that kind of thing. did actually do this for a job in high school for a charity, taking in instruments and cleaning them, fixing them up, and sending them back out to be used. So this is all standard stuff, nothing major going on here. In my initial playing, I noticed some issues with the electronics. There is some scratchiness on the pickup selector, and the tone knob here is kind of loose and sometimes cuts out. So that's an issue. Other than that, we're going to get some new strings on. I'm going to clean all this stuff up. First order of business is just going to be cleaning and getting all this dust off of here. So I've got this all cleaned up. At this point, I could just go ahead and restring it, set it up, and it'd be in great shape. But I do want to try to make some aesthetic modifications, make this look a little metal, and I think I'm going to remove these pickup covers and swap them out with some black ones, see how that looks. Maybe replace these amber knobs with some black ones, remove this pickup selector thing entirely, and get rid of the cream knob. Basically, decream it as much as possible. I don't think we need the pick guard cover. It looks all right, but I think it looks nicer without it. So I'm not going to go ahead and black out all the hardware because that would be expensive, and the tuners are actually quite nice on this. There is some stuff I want to do with the electronics, just cleaning stuff up and making sure all the connections are good. I like to use electronics cleaner, clean up the pots, even though these aren't scratchy. This one is cutting out, so I have to figure out what's going on with that. So I happen to have some extra black pickguard rings. They're not the curved ones. The ones that should go on have a curve to them. But rather than buy some new ones, these fit okay. They're not quite a perfect fit, but they're okay. I also have another Epiphone here with a black pickup selector ring. It is a bit scratched up, but I could also flip it over or just not use it. It also has black knobs, so I could try these out and see how they look. I was just going to buy stuff, but if I can swap stuff around and not buy the new ones, then great, that works. So I've been able to get all this done without ordering anything else new. I've got the black pickup selector knob here from my other Epiphone, as well as the volume control knobs. The only issue here, which you probably can't see on camera, is that there's 3 volume and 1 tone knob. It does have volume written on the top. I don't really care. It's not ideal, but, you know, I don't think anyone is really going to be bothered by that. I think it looks pretty slick. I decided to just do away with the ring here for the pickup selector because I don't think it's really necessary. You should know what it is. I think it looks cleaner without it, especially since we're going without the pick guard and we're going for a little more minimalist look. I hope you like it. I think it's pretty sick looking. So once we get some strings on here, it should be good to go. I did 2 passes of fret leveling on it, and I used the Fret Guru fret leveling beam. That's a really nice piece of equipment. Not cheap for an aluminum beam, but it does the job well, and it's super straight, and I trust their tools. I did 2 passes of that because the first pass I did make a big difference, but I wasn't 100% happy with the results anyways. The action wasn't quite as low and as buzz-free as I wanted. So I went back and I did some more. And then you have to recrown it and do some more individual tweaking with the Fret Dagger crowning file, which is also a $40 file, but a nice tool. So I've got the action set at just a hair over 3/64ths on the low E and exactly 3/64ths on the high E. And I've got this thing set up in C standard, and it's pretty awesome and relatively buzz-free. I mean, that's quite a low action, quite a bit lower than any of my other guitars. I've actually, since doing this one, had to go back and tweak some of my other guitars because this one plays so much better. I have to fix those up now. And yeah, there's still a little bit of buzz. There always will be. I could eliminate if I went up to a more medium-high action, but for me, I'd rather have a lower action and a little bit of buzz, especially because the buzz is quite good and no more than I have on any other guitar. I've tried a number of methods to polish and clean off corrosion from frets, and I find this to be the fastest and the least amount of work, and that's just using steel wool. The trick here is to go along the grain of the neck, so go down the neck, don't go side to side, because if you do so, you will scratch up the wood of your fingerboard and it won't look as nice. So go straight down the neck when you do this and just keep going until the frets are nice and shiny, and this will clean them up if they're old and corroded, or if you just need to get rid of any final scratch marks from your sanding and your filing process. After this, we're going to use some lemon oil, and this is to hydrate the wood of the fingerboard and restore its nice natural luster. You don't want to go crazy with the lemon oil. I just like to apply a little bit on each fret and then go over it with some paper towel, make sure it's all worked into the wood and everything's looking nice. We don't want too much oil, and we don't want to let it sit around too long on the fingerboard, so just apply a little bit to the fingerboard and work it in well with the paper towels. I'm setting this guitar up for C standard, so I'm using the D'Addario EXL 148 strings. These are good for drop C or C standard. And since this is a Les Paul, I've put all the strings into the tailpiece first, just to make it a little easier, and then make sure they are in the bridge slots. Here I'm holding the string at the tuning post, and I'm pulling it back 1 fret length, and this is going to give me the correct amount of string left over so I can cut it here, and I'll still get a nice amount of coil wraps on the tuning post. For thicker wound strings like this, you may need to trim away more of the string because you're not going to be able to fit 3 wraps around the tuning post on this thick string. My goal is to get 2 or 3 wraps on each tuning post, and these are going to go under the end of the string that goes through the hole. That way they push up and lock against each other as they tighten. It's going to get you the best tuning stability, and it looks nicer. I also keep each coil neatly tucked under the last one. Again, just looks nicer, but it will also improve your tuning stability. On the plain strings, it's even harder to get the wraps to stack up neatly under each other, but it is possible if you take your time. Just push down and make sure you're guiding each wrap under the last one. Here I'm checking the relief of the truss rod with a feeler gauge. I've got a capo at the 1st fret, and this is a 0.005 or 0.13 millimeter feeler gauge. That's going to give us the proper truss rod relief measured at the 6th fret. Here I'm using my crowning file to do some final spot leveling because this last fret was sticking up a bit high and causing some buzz. Once again, polishing out those file marks with the steel wool. After this, I set up the guitar. I played around with it, and it was pretty good, but I wanted to get the action even lower, and it had a little too much buzz for my taste. I'd already put a lot of work into it, so I decided I'll tape off the frets again, and I'll go through the whole process one more time, doing the fret leveling, starting again by flattening out the neck, marking the frets to see that I've actually leveled all of them, and then going through with the fret leveling beam. This time a little less aggressively. I'm not taking off too much of the frets. That also means less crowning of the frets later. Here I've got some flexible cloth sanding pads from 500 grit up to 4000 grit. These are another alternative way to polish up your frets and remove any sanding marks. I figured I'd try it here just to show off the method and see if it would polish up the frets even more than before. After this, I put the strings back on, got everything up to pitch, make sure the truss rod relief and the action is where I want it, and then go through with the fret rocker again and check for any high frets that I will then spot level and polish again. While I didn't change out the pickups or anything, I think the fretwork and the action go a long way towards improving the sound of this guitar. Not to mention putting newer strings on that aren't a decade old, that helps. But having a low action that's not buzzy ends up having quite a nice resonance. I think, and hopefully this might come across maybe in the clean stuff, I think it just got better sustain. It's got less buzzing, so the notes sound clearer. They have nicer sustain and resonance. I think it's a much nicer sounding instrument and ends up not only playing really well, but sounding good as a result too. So I'll do some high gain stuff first and then some clean tones to really show off the sound of this guitar. Yeah, so overall, this came out really great, and I learned a lot about doing some fretwork, doing some proper leveling across the whole neck, as well as recrowning, and really getting this action as low as possible. So it was a good experience because I've done kind of some fretwork. I've done some individual crowning, removing high frets if I've got a particular buzz problem. It's important to know how to do that stuff, but this is more of a total makeover. And this one wasn't really bad. I mean, honestly, it was a Epi Les Paul that had basically never been played, and it wasn't like kept in terrible condition. So did it really need this much fretwork? Probably not, but I did get the action really nice and low, and that's always fun. So it definitely made a big difference. As for the weight, you know, it's a Les Paul, but these Epiphone ones, I think, weigh about 9.5, somewhere in that. It's a heavy, chunky guitar, and I think heavier than anything else I own, except maybe my Warwick bass, the made in Germany one. That one's a bit heavy, but other than that, it's definitely heavier than any of my other guitars or basses. But I did feel a real 80s Gibson Les Paul the other day. It was quite a cool experience, a real rare old Gibson, and that thing was so much heavier, and so I had to weigh it, and it was 11.5 pounds, but man, that doesn't sound as heavy as it felt. This was the heaviest guitar I'd ever felt. 11.5 pounds in a guitar is just like monstrous. I'm sure there's heavier guitars, maybe, but I've never felt a guitar that heavy. It felt like it was 20 pounds, even though it wasn't. That's the quality of Epiphone. They're lighter than a Gibson. I did have some issues with the volume pots. I don't know if I messed them up taking things apart or something, or if they'd just been sitting and kind of rotted. I don't know. But they're these proprietary push-pull Epiphone volume pots that allow you to split the coil, but they're not your standard push-pull volumes. They have a little circuit board, and it's really easy, I think, for the factory workers because everything's kind of a wiring harness that you can just snap together with little clips, and you don't have to solder everything, which would be great, except that finding the original push-pull volume pot from Epiphone, well, they don't sell them, but you can get them on eBay, but they're like $20 a piece, which is crazy. So I just got some regular push-pulls. I had to do a lot of experimenting with the wiring and checking with my multimeter and looking at different diagrams online. Eventually, I figure it out. Push-pull volume pots are kind of complicated, but again, learning experience, it's all good. You know, I love to learn. It's not terrible unpaid labor. It's free education. Just view it that way. I also have the Fender Mustang amp that the owner bought with this guitar. It might be kind of fun. I guess it will be. Sure, that's what I do. I look at weird old modeling amps. It's not a hidden gem. It's kind of cool. Honestly, it could have been good. But sound-wise, it just doesn't quite keep up. And under the hood, it ain't all right. And it doesn't compare even with the old free Poulin plugins, which were awesome, and they were ahead of their time. So that's not to diss them, but an amp that is newer was not as good as free software that was older. So that doesn't look so good for Fender or whoever made the Mustang software. I think it might have been IK, but I'm not quite sure on that. I know they did have some partnership with them. I don't know if Fender owns IK or if they're just connected somehow. There was something on the amp advertising that there was IK software included or something, but I don't know. I don't know exactly. I'll do some more research. I'll do a video on that one, I guess. So I hope you've enjoyed checking out this Epi guitar, and I hope you smash like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.